All right, so today we're going to cover, at least on my end, before Sean jumps on, I'll talk about what is conversion tracking, how conversion tracking can improve your profits with advertising. And I'm going to walk through a conversion tracking case study that shows you how we were able to drive more profits for our client, as well as more revenue per sale or average order value. So conversion tracking 101, just to get everyone up to speed here. Really the key here, key concept or key takeaway, is that the goal of advertising is not impressions and clicks, and by default, every ad network will report on impressions and clicks, and those are important to look at, but at the end of the day, you're not advertising for impressions and clicks, you're trying to drive leads and sales, and that's where conversion tracking comes into play. With conversion tracking, you want to know what's happening after that impression, after someone actually clicks on your ad, and you want to be able to track metrics like number of leads, number of sales, cost per lead, cost per sale. I already mentioned revenue per lead or revenue per sale. And those are key metrics, and we'll talk about this later in the case study. Those are really the metrics you'll use to optimize your Google AdWords campaign. You can't optimize a campaign if you're just looking at clicks and impressions, because you don't know if those clicks are actually leading to leads and sales for your business. And another key takeaway here, I've talked to a lot of businesses, and a lot of times the mindset with advertising is that it's an expense. It's just a cost. They think, okay, you know, I'm going to invest $500 or $5,000 a month, whatever it is, and it's just an expense every month. But really, I hope everyone attending today will realize that with advertising, you want to think more like investing. And when you think about investing, you think about putting $1 in and getting maybe $1.50 back. And that's what you want to go into. That's how you want to approach Google AdWords. And with that in mind, cost is really only half the picture. Another common mistake I see is businesses looking at just the cost per click of a keyword, or cost per click at a placement for a display campaign, and saying that's too expensive. And if you are making decisions on cost alone, I promise and can guarantee that you're missing out on big opportunities. And to prove that, a question here would be, is $100 per lead better than $150 per lead? And the answer there, that it actually depends. You would think that's an obvious answer, that $100 per lead is better, but it actually depends on the revenue that you're generating from those leads. And as most people realize when they're in business, all leads are not created equally. There's different value to different leads depending on that quality, and ultimately depending on how many of those leads you can actually convert into paying customers. So at the end of the day, you have to track the revenue from your ad campaigns and then be able to calculate your return on investment, or ROI. So now that you know what conversion tracking is, why it's important, I want to walk through the 5 types of conversion tracking that are available in Google AdWords. You've got your basic web form tracking. Most websites have a contact form or a request demo, request a quote. All the forms on your site you can track using web form tracking. If you have an e-commerce business, you can track all of the sales from your online shopping cart, and most importantly, you can track the revenue of those sales and get the revenue back into AdWords. We'll talk about that later. You can also track phone calls from your ad campaigns. Not only the number of calls, you can also track the sales and even revenue that was generated from those phone calls. There is a slight difference between phone calls from your website, and then there's also phone calls from the ad So if you have it's called an ad extension or a call extension where you're displaying a phone number directly in your ad, you can track those as well. And last but not least, you can even track offline sales that happen. Let's say someone clicks on an ad, requests a quote for your service or a product, and then you have a sales team that closes that over the phone. Well, you can actually import those deals back into Google AdWords and get that revenue data to report on. And we'll talk about all of those in the case study. So how can conversion tracking really improve profits? I'm sure a lot of people are wondering that. Before we get into that, there's 3 important facts about advertising. One key concept here is that all ad clicks are not created equal. If you've been running ads for any amount of time, you know that a small percentage of the people that are clicking on your ads will actually take action. And conversion rates vary. It depends on what you're offering and you're targeting, but they can vary anywhere from even less than 1% to, let's say, 5–10%, or even 40% for, let's say, a free offer. But even on the high end there, 40%, obviously the majority of the clicks are not actually taking action. Another key concept is that all the leads are not created equally. And I already mentioned that earlier. Some are not going to be qualified to actually buy your product or service. And another key concept is that all the sales that you generate are not created equally. You can segment your customers and realize that some of those customers are going to have a higher order value. If you have multiple products and services, some customers are going to buy more than others. They'll be worth more to your business. And kind of on the flip side, some customers will actually cost more. They'll just eat up your bandwidth and really, be kind of a headache as far as customer service goes. And you want to be mindful of that as well. So key takeaways here. Just because you're getting clicks on your ads, and even if you're getting leads from your ads and even sales, that doesn't mean that your ads are doing the best they possibly can for you. I've talked to a lot of businesses that are just looking at impressions and clicks and costs and cost per clicks, and that's how they're making decisions. Hopefully you realize that you can't be optimizing a campaign if that's all you're looking at. But even if you're tracking leads, you can be missing big opportunities, and I'll show you that in our case study. And even if you're tracking sales, if you're not looking at the actual order value and the costs associated with those customers, you could be missing out on big opportunities. At the end of the day, we're going to use conversion tracking to help us make better decisions about our ad campaigns and be able to allocate whatever budget you have for AdWords, be able to budget that towards the most profitable areas in your ad campaign. And we'll talk about 3 ways to increase profits in your AdWords campaign. Obvious one is eliminating waste. So when you get conversion tracking set up, you'll see that some keywords just won't be driving leads. They won't be driving any sales. Obviously, we want to pause those and reallocate the budget. Not just keywords, placements on the display network. Certain ads might not be performing well. You definitely want to take a look at devices. That can be a big issue in a lot of accounts. There's a big difference between the performance on desktops versus mobile, even versus tablets. Time of day and geolocations. You can segment your data in AdWords and basically run a profit and loss or return on investment analysis for those different segments. Then you want to maximize your revenue per sale or average order value, and then allocate the budget towards the keywords, placements, ads, devices, times, locations that are driving the highest order values. And ultimately, what we're talking about is maximizing profit. So looking at the revenue that's being generated and subtracting the cost for those ads, and then maximizing the profit in your entire campaign. So let's dive into the case study where we were able to generate 455% more profit and 1,159% more revenue per sale. Here's some company background. This is a company that was targeting customers in all of the US. So it's a national company. They had both, excuse me, e-commerce. They had an e-commerce part of their business, so people can go to the site and buy themselves. But they also had a traditional sales team, because a lot of their target audience doesn't really want to just buy it right away. They want to talk to someone, in which case they would request a quote, and then they would talk to the sales team, and those deals would be closed off of the internet. So it's a great case study because it kind of hits both types of businesses. So if you have an e-commerce business, works for you. And if you don't have an e-commerce business, this case study should highlight some keys if you have a more traditional sales process. So you can order online or request a quote, talk to that sales rep, and then the sales rep takes the order offline. And here's the key, that actually the majority of the sales were coming from quote requests when we started working with this client. So before we started, they did have e-commerce tracking or e-commerce conversion tracking, but the problem is they weren't bringing in the revenue of those sales. So it's basically in AdWords, you would see a conversion of 1 for 1 sale or 2 for 2 sales, but you wouldn't know how much those sales were worth. And ultimately, if you're doing that, if that's how you have your AdWords set up, you are forced to treat all sales equally. And then the quote requests were also being tracked, but we had no idea what was happening after the quote request. So we would see, that a particular keyword drove 10 quote requests in 1 month, and we'd have a cost per quote request. But again, we had no idea if those quote requests were actually leading to sales. So again, we're forced to optimize the campaign and treat all the leads the same, even though I mentioned earlier, all leads are not equal, and it's really leaving money on the table if that's what you're doing. So let's dive into what we did. 2 key improvements here related to conversion tracking. We obviously set up the revenue tracking. So we tracked the sales from the online shopping cart, sent that revenue back into Google AdWords. And then we set up what's called GCLID tracking, which is it's a type of conversion called an import conversion. And this allowed us to track those offline sales. So again, people would request a quote using the online form, and then the sale would happen offline, and we were able to import that data back into AdWords. I'll talk about how to set that up in just a minute. But first, if you're not familiar with revenue tracking, you want to check, if you have an e-commerce business and you have a shopping cart, you want to check if your shopping cart has basically has it built in to track revenue and send that data back into AdWords. A lot of the shopping carts will have that, so you just need to enable it. If there's no way to just simply flip a switch, you want to also just check if your shopping cart has instructions. And I know BigCommerce, for example, has a step-by-step document that explains how to get AdWords conversion tracking with revenue. They have that document on their site, so you just contact the shopping cart support. And if you do go through that and your shopping cart maybe is custom and you can't just flip a switch and they don't have any instructions, then you'll want to talk to your developer or whoever set up your shopping cart, and they'll need to add some conversion code to the thank you page of the order process. I'll show you what that looks like. This is some example code here. This is what you would get from AdWords. And I highlighted there with the green arrow the conversion value. So that's what you need to edit. And if your site was built on PHP code, that would be an example of how the code would look on the page. That's just putting the variable total value into the code. And that's essentially what you need to do, but it depends on what shopping cart you're using, what that actual variable and what that code would actually look like. So you would have to edit that. So that's on the e-commerce side of things. And now with the offline conversions, you want to set up what I call GCLID tracking or offline import. And if you're not familiar with that, I'll walk through how it works. Every time someone clicks on one of your ads, Google is going to create a unique ID called the GCLID, and that just stands for Google Click ID. So that happens automatically anytime someone clicks on your ad. And then that ID actually gets appended to your landing page URL. So if someone was coming to our site, let's say we're advertising to our homepage, it would be mainstreetroi.com, and then it would have a question mark, GCLID equals 123456. So you don't have to do anything. Google just adds that automatically. And then you'd have to work with your developer to access that GCLID and then have that code get submitted through your web forms. So again, if you have a request a quote like our client had, that form on your site, you would add a hidden field, and then you would submit the GCLID code through that hidden field of your form. And then ideally, that form is getting sent into your CRM or customer relationship management tool. If you're not using a CRM and maybe the forms just email you, then you would get an email alert, and that GCLID would be in the email, and you would just have to manually put that into a spreadsheet to track it. Then your sales team is going to sell, however you guys do that, over the phone, in person, via email, whatever you're doing. And then let's say a month goes by and you've had 10 deals were closed and they had GCLIDs assigned to them. So that would be in your CRM or in the spreadsheet. You then need to import the GCLID codes back into Google AdWords, and ideally you also import the revenue from those sales. So to show you what that looks like, actually one more thing, AdWords then takes that data, automatically matches the GCLIDs to, let's say, the keywords that were clicked on and the ads that were clicked on, and now you can see exactly how much money was generated from the clicks on your ads, even though those sales were offline. So here's an example of a manual import sheet. And you can see column B there is the click ID, Google Click ID or GCLID. And you can see some example GCLIDs there. They're just long, a long string of letters and numbers. And then column D there is the conversion value. So you just attach a value to that, whatever the value was of that sale. And then the conversion time. And then again, you upload that into Google AdWords. And then when you're in the AdWords interface running reports, here's a campaign level report. And you can see I just blurred out the campaign name. And then I'm highlighting with the green arrow, you can see the GCLID import - purchase. Those are the sales that were happening offline. And you can see I've got the total conversion value column there, $30,000 in value. Conversions there, 12. Cost per conversion, $583. Value per conversion, $2,528. And then just a custom column there for profit per conversion. You can see each sale there, we're making close to $2,000. So here's some case study results based on setting up that conversion tracking and then optimizing the campaign based on that data. So once we got that set up, pretty quickly we figured out that there were some keywords that were losing money even though they were driving sales. So that was a big eye-opener for us. And then we also found out that some keywords were driving quote requests but no sales. And that's obviously a game changer, because before we had this tracking, we would see that keywords were driving quote requests. We thought that was great. It was within the range of the cost per quote that we were looking for. So before we had this set up, that would look great. But then once we figured out those quote requests were just not, for whatever reason, turning into sales, we were able to turn off that type of advertising. And then again, previously we would treat that equally. So here's what AdWords will show you when you don't have revenue data. So you'll get, at the keyword level, you can see the cost. You can see all the metrics I'm sure you're familiar with, cost per click, click-through rate. But highlighted here is the cost. We've got the conversions, 9 here, and cost per conversion of $94. And we knew, based on talking with the client, that on average, if they were getting quote requests for under $100, everything was great. But then again, once we layered on the actual value data, you can see here, this keyword is actually losing money. And that's just because those quote requests that keyword is driving, for whatever reason, are just not leading to high order values. So you can see revenue per sale is too low, so that keyword's not profitable. And here's another example here where I blurred out the keyword and just renamed it keyword number 1 and keyword number 2. And then this is a report in AdWords where I'm segmenting by conversion name. And in keyword number 1, you can see quick quote. That was an online quote. So that's the conversion there. We've got 15 quick quote conversions for a cost per conversion, $54. Everything looks great, but unfortunately we don't see any sales for keyword number 1 versus keyword number 2, where we have 14 quick quotes and we do have a sale. So that keyword is actually looking okay. So $151 generated with a cost of only $108 versus, again, that keyword number 1, which has a much higher cost, $815, and it has not generated a sale. So again, that was a big opportunity in this particular campaign to reallocate budget from keywords that were just wasting money driving these quotes that were not leading to sales, and even worse for the client, driving all of these quotes and wasting the sales team's time. So kind of that's the hidden cost there that was really affecting the business. So here's a graph just showing you when we started here, April, excuse me, April 2015 was the first month with tracking, and we saw $20,000 profit, $52 cost per sale, and then I should have updated this, but the last time I did update these slides was in August here, August 2016. You can see 114,000 profit, $664 per sale. So the average order value has skyrocketed from just $52 to $664, and you can see the profit increased as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Sean.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Phil. Very great, very good information, and some great results. And yeah, it's very informative. What I'm going to add to the story is just a little bit about talking about automating some of the processes that were involved in advertising, as well as using automation to accelerate conversion rates, etc. So next slide for me there, Phil. I just want to talk just very briefly about a couple of things. One is journey automation. The concept is to really being able to use data, dynamic content, and automation software to personalize or adapt the assets to the individual based on behavioral segmentation, things that the prospect has done, and using this data to contextualize what's presented to the user to, again, help them with the buying process. Next slide. One of the things that we're all facing, I think, is that some of our buyer journeys are getting a little bit longer, and it's odd that they can be longer and actually be compressed in time. And what I mean by longer and compressed in time is there's so much data available to all of our buyers. Everybody wants to be an expert. They take the time to make they want to spend their money wisely. So it's a case they'll have a very short burst of very high engagement, trying to make a decision. So even if it's a 2-day engagement or 3-day engagement or what have you, it's really just this random process of them trying to become an expert. And quite often it's a case that people will come back to the same vendor site more than one time and not even realize that they've been to that vendor site before, or view a landing page from an ad more than once, and again not really have in their mind that they've been here before. And I think one of the mistakes we have as marketers is basically always ensuring that the prospect starts at the beginning of the path every time they've engaged with your assets. Next slide, please. So really what we offer is a marketing solution or technology solution that helps with this journey automation, this conversion tracking, and contextualization of code, and I should say content. And I know a lot of the people on the call today are ActiveDEMAND users, and really and they've heard me talk about this many times, and really I'm just trying to introduce the concepts to the folks that aren't currently ActiveDEMAND users. Next slide. So I have a couple of examples that I've some of them are things that we've done as a marketing organization trying to sell our products, and other things reference how we've seen agencies or marketers use our platform to automate some of the processes. So the first example I'm going to talk about is deal automation. And next slide. And the story is very similar to what Phil talked about, but the difference here is really that we're using automation to flow the data from the initial ad click through to when the purchase is made. So really what happens here is that if you think about an ad click, the ad click comes and it hits a landing page, and if it's an ActiveDEMAND landing page, of course the session is captured by ActiveDEMAND. And then in the case where we're engaging with a sales organization, we'll push the lead into the CRM, the sales will engage, and then when this deal is closed, it posts back to ActiveDEMAND, which is the automation platform, and then at this time it actually posts the data through to, with the GCL ID, through to Google Analytics. We've linked the ad platform to Google Analytics, and hence the ad platform now sees the results of the conversion. And really the whole process here is automated. Next slide. And for those people that are using ActiveDEMAND, you've seen something like this, whether it's in a custom lead processing workflow or it's in a drip campaign or something of the sort. Basically, what you do is you have an event step that is triggered, for example, when a form is submitted, or if you're using one of the call tracking numbers that are in ActiveDEMAND. And this is a unique one that I've seen used a lot, is actually a chat, right? Because somebody comes to the site and using integrated chat, or in the case of ActiveDEMAND, like with OLARC, they can actually engage with the prospect on chat, and that's considered removes the anonymity and connects the session data with the visitor who's clicked through on the ad or what have you. And then basically there's a wait step waiting for a new deal, because basically the lead will be pushed to the salespeople will engage with the prospect, or alternatively, if it's done through e-commerce, it's really waiting for the deal to be closed. And when the deal is closed, it posts back to ActiveDEMAND as a deal one. And then at this time, it posts, because ActiveDEMAND's sitting there in that wait state with the GCL ID, and then it posts the custom event into Google Analytics, which of course flows through to Google AdWords. Of course, with this process, there's an assumption that the time to sale, we're measuring it not in months, but more like in weeks, because there is a limit on how long Google Analytics will accept the event being posted before it falls off the radar, so to speak, with Google Analytics. Next slide. So the results very similar to what Phil was talking about, but I guess the difference here is really the automation, right? It's seamless. You just let whether it's phone calls, chats, form submits, the conversions are all tracked within ActiveDEMAND anyways, and it's maintaining the GCL ID, and really there's no manual uploading of any of the data, and you get the results flowing through to AdWords, and as well through the automated reporting within ActiveDEMAND. Next slide. So the next example I'm going to talk about is really showing how to do conversion rate optimization with dynamic content. And this actually example is something that it's an example we've actually done with our AdWord campaigns, because we do engage with ad spend just like everybody else here on the phone, or most of the people, as the poll indicated. So next slide. So what we did here, so we have a landing page product, and with a landing page product, we have a lot of competitors that also have provide landing page solutions. So a common strategy here is to target keyword searches for your competitors' products and with an ad. And if they see the ad, then basically, the idea being is you're trying to attract somebody to click on the ad as opposed to the competitor's results. And then it flows through to the landing page. And really what we did here, because we have lots of competitors in this space with the landing pages, we really wanted to leverage adaptive content based on the keyword search. So really, instead of having a long list of very different landing pages, or having a very generic landing page that hopefully will be right for everybody that clicked on a specific ad, we used the dynamic content and connected it to the value track parameters from Google's ads, so that we could adapt the landing page to the actual keyword search. Next slide. And you can see it here. So I'm not sure how this is tracking, but basically, if somebody searched for Unbounce, which is one of our competitors, they click the ad, the landing page is talking in depth about how much better we are than Unbounce. And if it's a case that they search for lead pages, which is another competitor, our same ad shows up and the same landing page shows up, but now the page dynamically adapts, and it's really honing in on the keyword that was searched before the page actually renders. So it's a way for us to contextualize the content based on what the keyword search was before the landing page shows up. Next slide there. And so really the results, our conversion rates went way up because we were able to contextualize the message to the person who was actually to the search term, right? And which makes sense, you know, instead of having just a generic page saying, oh, please try out our landing pages because it's better than something out there, we could say explicitly, not just, you know, very, very detailed about the compete strategy for each of the different competitive keyword searches. And another benefit was actually the reduced effort in doing this. You know, if you think about the permutations and combinations of the different keyword searches, we, instead of having all of these different landing pages to manage, we had one landing page with a lot of dynamic content. So it was very easy for us to optimize for a broader set of keywords with, again, just one asset to maintain. Next slide. So this one's a little bit more of a more complex of a story, and really we're going to show you a little bit about the journey automation and the impact on conversion rates with journey automation. Many sales out there today, it's a multi-touch engagement on the marketing side, and then possibly multi-touch on the sales side. So we have these two variables, and one of the variables being stage of the buyer journey. The second variable is the buyer profile, because there could be multiple different buyer profiles that we're selling to. Next slide. So what we did is we identified for us 3 journey stages, and we identified for us 3 buyer profiles. And we sell a lot to agencies. We sell a lot to software as a service businesses. We sell a lot to B2B businesses as well. And we sell to B2C, but really for this example, we were just looking at these 3 buyer profiles. And then once we identified the buyer profiles, we also looked at the 3 stages of the buyer journey for us. And we built out the dynamic audiences. And this is a concept that ActiveDEMAND has, where you can identify an audience based on behavior and activities, as well as the metadata for the individual. And we linked these dynamic audiences to our content on our landing pages, websites, and email. And we also push these dynamic audiences into the ad platforms. Next slide. So really, the dynamic content, we adapted our hero banners on all of our product pages all over the website for the 3 buyer profiles. And it was the case that we as well synchronized our email communications based on these 3 buyer profiles. So it's the same, you're seeing 3 pictures of the exact same page on our website, but being the positioning is unique to the individual buyer profile. And then we would sync this buyer profile we would push the custom audience into the ad platforms. So for example, when somebody signs up for a trial, the next stage for us is to engage with a meeting. So because we have integrated appointment scheduling, the website will now shift for that individual. So for example, if they're an agency, the website, after they've signed up for a free portal, would now be talking about booking a meeting, getting the most out of the meeting, as well as the ad platforms as well would now be presenting that individual with ads that are talking about agencies that have a trial, that should be booking a meeting with us, and again on the next stage of the journey. The end of the day is our emails, our website, and the ads targeting. We could actually target very, very with high accuracy the different segments and the different stages of the buyer journey. Next stage, next slide for me, please. And the results, we actually saw, a 300% increase in, conversion rates. It absolutely increased our conversion rates. And as far as the website engagement, the time on site increased again like 200 to 300%. And page depth, as far as a visit was concerned, also increased from 200 to 300%. And it makes sense because really, if you think about somebody coming back to the website or re-engaging with us, we really were trying to contextualize the entire experience so that, again, they're not starting from scratch, and we'll actually inject their name, etc., onto the page so that it's very clear that if they do come back to us, it's a case that we're indicating that we know who the person is, and we're helping them from the stage of the buyer journey that they left off on. Next slide. So I'm just going to pass things back to Phil to talk about, just sort of recap what he covered here, and then I'll talk about a couple of things as well. So we also have some offers at the end of this presentation, so definitely stick around for those. Phil?
All right, great. Thanks, Sean. So recap on what I discussed, just that ultimately conversion tracking is going to show you what's happening after the click. Hopefully that point was hammered. Tracking number of leads and sales is not enough. You also need to track the actual revenue. That gets into value per sale, average order value, and you want to make sure you're setting up e-commerce revenue tracking for your online shopping cart if you have one. If you have an offline sales component, then you want to make sure you're setting up GCLID imports to track the revenue per sale of those deals. And I mentioned earlier, I don't have it on the slide here, but you can also track phone call revenue as well. That's a separate import that you can do in Google AdWords.
Yeah, and I talked a bit about journey automation and automating the engagement from the ad click all the way through to the conversion, and as well being able to pull in automatically the value data or the deal data, and then push this stuff through to the ad platform. So really, and hopefully I communicated as well, journey automation really is a great way to improve conversion rates, reduce the friction in the buying process, and really drive engagement with your content.